Lawbreeze and Gentlegrams, we got a special one today because after months of absolute silence, an absolute sweep at the Grammys, releasing a diss song that has become the most awarded hip-hop song in Grammys history, and on the cusp of being the first rapper to solo headline the Super Bowl halftime show, Kendrick Lamar has sat down and finally given us the first live interview we've gotten from him, I believe in years, and definitely since this whole beef ensued. You know, sometimes you gotta pop out and sit down with Ebro and Nadeska for an interview. So we're gonna break down everything Kendrick said in this interview. Yes, they asked him some softball questions, but Nadeska especially really killed it on digging into Kendrick's psyche a little bit, digging into his creative process, and how he's kind of been approaching 2024 and 2025 with this newfound energy. So yeah, he's not discussing anything about, you know, Drizzy defamation Poppy's petty petition, or the 11-year-old daughter that Drake is allegedly hiding somewhere, or the A minor chords that Drake might be striking in Australia. But he's definitely reflecting on the beef. He's definitely reflecting on the creation of GNX, how he approaches songwriting. It's really cool to see how he structures a song, especially complex songs like Reincarnated. And he's giving us a glimpse into what we can expect at the Super Bowl. Will he perform Not Like Us? Will he bring out Drake and his A minors as a surprise guest? Well, we'll have to wait and see. And don't forget, this is like the press conference promotional interview for the Super Bowl. I don't believe this is like the formal sit down that Kendrick will inevitably probably have. We know he's doing another interview tomorrow with Timothy Chalamet. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name right. I can never pronounce that dude's name. That's the one who's either with Zendaya or Kylie Jenner. I get both of those dudes mixed up. They both kind of look like me. Small little white dudes with two baddies. One of them plays Superman, and one of them is interviewing Kendrick Lamar tomorrow. So stay tuned for that as well. We might break that one down tomorrow. But as for today, I think Nadeska was a great pick for this interview. Ebro too asked some dope questions, but Nadeska is really this like genuine, unproblematic, kind-hearted woman. Like you could just tell based off, I don't know, her aura or her lines of questioning. Like Schoolboy Q, when he was doing his promo run for his album Blue Lips last year, he specifically chose to sit down with her because he knew she wasn't thirsty for a headline or thirsty for the gossip. Like she would actually jump into the music and what's important. And she's come a long way. She used to host or moderate Everyday Struggle with Joe Budden and Akademiks. She was always the level-headed one, kind of calming them down, stopping Akademiks from guzzling Big Macs in the middle of the set. And you'll see she asked Kendrick some great questions, which really got him to open up on his creative process that we've never really heard before from him. So to start it off, if you guys want more of a hint that they'll definitely be playing Not Like Us at the Super Bowl, Kendrick actually walks out into the interview with Not Like Us playing in the background.
Well, y'all gotta make some more noise than that.
And they start off the interview asking Kendrick how he's been processing all the success that he saw in 2024. Don't forget, this isn't just like, you know, extra spotlight on him, more fame, more headlines, or more accolades like the Grammys, etc. This is beyond that, right? Like they were throwing out some disgustingly intense allegations against one another throughout this battle. I mean, in Drake's lawsuit, he literally attributes Not Like Us to being the reason why his house was attacked multiple times, why his security guard got hit with a firearm. You know, Kendrick on Whacked Out Murals talked about how Drake was offering people within Kendrick's camp money for information. He threw Kendrick's manager, his childhood friend, and his wife into the whole mix with Family Matters. Like all this dirt going back and forth, the security factor that has come with, you know, drama like this, it definitely weighs heavy on your conscience and on your head. And as far as how Kendrick has taken it all in, he says he kind of looks at the success or the evolution that he saw in 2024 as just a continuation of his character. The difference in the amount of eyeballs on him, the love he's been receiving or the hate he's been receiving, the milestones he's achieving, all this is essentially just an evolution of the path that he's always been on, and how he handles it is simply by remaining on that same path that he was on 10 years ago.
I want to look at it like it's just a continuum of who I am, really. I've always stayed to myself. I've always been in my own bubble, whether it's with the fam or whether it's training. How I process it all is just, I continue to do what I was doing 10 years ago, and that's like, be better in myself, better in the craft, and not look at it as bright lights, you know?
And Kendrick says that's always how he's approached everything he's done in life. He ignores the outside noise. He's not looking at fame as this, you know, big grandiose thing. He's approaching it as if he's looking at himself in the mirror, just trying to become a better version of himself.
And it may sound cliche, but it always worked for me, even when I was younger. You know, playing sports or being in the forefront of presentations and stuff like that. It was like, I gotta look at myself in the mirror rather than looking at it as a crowd or, you know, fame and attention.
And that's a powerful thing, right? Because the fame and the accolades and outside validation is great, but in order to reach these achievements, the work starts from sharpening your own sword, making sure you can constantly be in that peak performance position, which will eventually inevitably lead the success to come to you. And that leads us into the Super Bowl. All that hard work that led Lil Wayne down has led Kendrick to the Super Bowl, and Ebro asks him, like, was he thinking of the Super Bowl when he started his career? Was that like a goal that he envisioned being able to accomplish later on down the line?
Early days of your career, Section 80 days, even early mixtapes, you perfecting your craft as an MC. Did you ever think we'd be at the Super Bowl with this?
I wasn't thinking about no Super Bowl.
You never thought about the Super Bowl?
I wasn't thinking about no Super Bowl for sure. We was thinking about the best verse and how we gonna split this $5 at Church's Chicken or something like that. It wasn't no Super Bowl. Going to the studio and getting a meal.
But like Kendrick mentioned before, he kind of lives in this state of continuum. He stays true to the foundation that he started with, so he emphasizes that even though he might have not dreamt of the Super Bowl as a long-term goal early on, the passion that he had for the craft way back then is the same as it is now, even if today the goals might be bigger. And again, it was that passion that got him to the Super Bowl stage.
The passion I have now is still the passion I had then. And I think that carried on to the Super Bowl. So it was all about being present. As long as I was present in the studio and present in whatever that line was or whatever that mistake was, rapping or doing hooks or choruses or whatnot, I was present in that moment. I felt that passion. I think being present and not actually foreseeing everything kept me in the grounded state of mind in order to be at, big stages like this.
And the thing he says about being present, I believe is really important. Like, there's a lot you could learn from this interview on simply how to better your own mentality just by seeing how Kendrick approaches things like improving his craft, where he roots his passion from, how he creates songs. He talks about that process later on in the interview, which is really interesting. And he'll also expand later on the importance of being present. And you could really see it within his music, right? Every project is really just a reflection of where Kendrick is in that present moment. GNX is kind of like that victory lap, asserting his dominance, kind of celebrating. Mr. Morale was him working on himself. To Pimp a Butterfly was him trying to break this cycle. Good Kid, Mad City was him contextualizing that cycle and displaying his perspective within it. And Damn was him kind of realizing the only thing he could really change is himself. You don't get these type of projects if Kendrick isn't very self-aware of his character in the present moment. And again, I gotta emphasize how Nadeska was killing it with these questions. She follows up by asking him, how it feels to be the first solo hip-hop artist headlining the Super Bowl, what it feels like to hit that milestone, and what it really means for the progression and the impact of hip-hop to think that it came this far where we'll now be seeing an all hip-hop halftime show. Like, I remember being younger, seeing like the Black Eyed Peas headline. I think Coldplay also headlined when I was a kid, and I didn't watch football much, but it was always a big deal, the halftime show. And I always wondered, like, especially back then, why they never had someone like a Kanye West, who was huge at the time, or a Lil Wayne, or even an Eminem. I remember being like 10 years old saying like, I don't care about this halftime show unless I see T-Pain or Akon on this stage. Instead, they had Black Eyed Peas boom boom powing and all that. So yeah, I really think it speaks volumes to the massive year that Kendrick had and the great place that hip hop is in right now, to the point where he can go and do a show like this off the strength of a purely hip-hop album and a #1 smash single that was a diss record that was just straight full of bars. And Kendrick emphasizes that, like, the fact that he could go from, handing out mixtapes on a street corner to being on a stage like this speaks volumes to the progression of hip-hop.
People don't see the story before the glory. Going to neighborhoods and performing there, hole-in-the-wall spots, it reminds me of the essence and of rap and hip-hop and how far it can go. So it puts the culture on the forefront where it needs to be and not minimized to just a catchy song or verse. This is a true art form. So to represent it on this type of stage is like everything that I believe in as far as the culture. Like, I live and die by it. This changed my whole family life, so I don't take it for granted.
I love that expression, the story before the glory. But from here, we get into the beef. And Kendrick breaks down what his intention was behind it, behind starting it. He talks about how much he values the art form of hip-hop. So Ebro asks him, like, what was your intention with this beef? Was it really to basically draw a line in the sand between people who respect the art form and, putting the genre, putting the culture on your back? But Kendrick answers, emphasizing that, drawing the line or separating himself from other artists wasn't necessarily his intention behind starting this battle, and that, again, his passion or his intentions haven't changed since day one. It's all a continuum. and his objective has always been to preserve the sport of hip-hop.
My intent was to always keep, I think from day one was to always keep the nature of it as a sport. You know, I don't care how motherfuckers look at it as far as like, as a collaborative effort, you know.
And on a side note, I definitely think that whole, I don't care how people look at it from a collaborative standpoint, that's definitely a snub at J. Cole and Drake. Because remember how this beef started, right? Kendrick wasn't really dropping much music in 2023. It was kind of a silent year for hip-hop, except from J. Cole and Drake, who were hugging and kissing on stage and doing songs saying we're the big three, embracing collaboration over competition. They allegedly even asked Kendrick to be one of the features on that first-person shooter song that kicked off this whole battle. And this is at a time, I remember, when For All the Dogs dropped, hip-hop was in a much different place than it is today. It felt extremely dry. There was no real fight for that top position. The future of, who would take that torch from the big three to carry on and become the next superstar within hip-hop was also kind of up for debate. Like, Travis Scott had the biggest hip-hop album that year, and it was a great album, Utopia, but I can't remember one bar from it. The emphasis wasn't on lyricism or competition. So Kendrick here is saying, like, collaboration is cool, but don't forget that this is a competition. Don't forget the essence of this thing. And he goes on to name a bunch of different battle rappers, emphasizing that this is where hip-hop came from. This was the root of it, battle rapping. And if you lose that or forget that, the art form suffers.
You know, I don't care how motherfuckers look at it as far as like, as a collaborative effort, that's cool too, but I love when artists grit their teeth. Like, I still watch battle raps. I still watch Smack URL from Murder Mook to Lux to Tay-Rock, my bro Daylight. This has always been the core definition of who I am, and it's been that way since day one. So I don't think it was a thing for this year. It was always just a continuum.
But while that competitive nature, that desire to elevate the art form has always been there, Kendrick emphasizes that this year specifically, when he jumped out saying F the big three, that was specifically because he felt like hip-hop, like I said before, had taken a back seat and really just needed some fresh energy.
What I will say about this year, it was more from a space where I think a lot of people was putting rap to the back, and you didn't see that. You didn't see that grit. You didn't see that bite anymore. So I always took that in consideration in going into any type of my music.
And he speaks to an important point, right? Like, I remember it wasn't just the fact that, hip-hop felt a little dry. It was that the labels weren't really investing in hip-hop like they were in the 2010s decade. We weren't seeing, the next big hip-hop superstar because the labels weren't putting in the work to go invest in that talent. It definitely existed. It just hadn't been cultivated and, shoved in our faces, really. Instead, there was articles left and right about, labels investing more into country music, into reggaeton, into those genres, surpassing hip-hop as the more dominant genres on the charts. The future was looking a bit bleak, not from necessarily a creative perspective, but if the labels don't see a reason to invest in the future of the genre, it's not going to be able to evolve at the heights that, we're seeing now with, rappers solo headlining Super Bowl stages, winning 5 Grammys, having #1 songs. And I remember exactly where I was the first time I heard Kendrick's verse on Like That. Like, I was just looking forward to Future and Metro Boomin's project. It was solid. Nothing was standing out to me crazy. I knew that Like That would be a dope song because Metro had previewed it previously and the beat just sounded out of this world. But they did this thing where they hid the features, so you didn't know who was going to appear on what song. And then all of a sudden, you just hear Kendrick's voice, which was great. We hadn't heard a verse from him in like over a year at that point, I believe. And then he pops out with the F the big three, it's just big me. For all your dogs getting buried, that's okay with all these nines. He's going to see pet cemeteries. Just with that one verse alone, Kendrick completely revived the competitive spirit within the genre. He had everyone in shambles. And look at the, aftermath of that, right? No pun intended. But now you're seeing, again, rappers on Super Bowl stages. You're seeing hip-hop going back to being the most dominant genre on streaming platforms. You had massive releases from Future, Tyler, Travis, Kendrick, Eminem, Doechii, Kanye all last year. You had cable TV news outlets covering the Drake and Kendrick beef. You had the whole West Coast crushing it. Amazing albums from Schoolboy Q, Vince Staples, etc. You had new superstars emerge like Doechii. We've seen more rap battles in the last 12 months than we saw in the entire 2020s decade. Like, I bet you forgot that Quavo and Chris Brown had a whole rap battle. I bet you forgot Rick Ross put out a diss track on Drake's head. I bet you didn't even know that The Game then dropped a diss track on Rick Ross. Or all the other rappers who dissed Drake, like A$AP Rocky, even The Weeknd. Then you had Joey Batman going at Kendrick and the entire West Coast attacking him. It revitalized the soul of the art. All from that one verse. All from putting that emphasis back on competition. And then Nadeska says, considering that Kendrick has always moved throughout his whole career with, integrity and authenticity, it was definitely shocking for the world to see what we presumed as this newfound energy, this newfound sense of competitive spirit and perspective on the game and the biggest players within it. And she asks him if this was just the world that felt surprised by this shift in the energy that we saw Kendrick have last year, or if Kendrick himself was surprised with what he pulled off. And Kendrick again emphasizes that perspective of just, being in a sequence of continuity in who he is as a person and his journey. And because of that, he wasn't shocked by what he pulled off because that passion has always been inside of him. What we saw with Drake was following the same blueprint of what Kendrick used to do in his hometown when he was on the come up.
I don't think I surprised myself because for me and for my partners that's been around me since 2005, 2006, like my brothers, they know my personality. They know my capabilities, even when it wasn't presented to the public at first. This is just like a revolving door of what I've been doing in Carson Studios, at the homie garage, or my brothers at TDE, or just anybody around the city of Compton. It's just magnified to the level where I know where to place it now. I know how to make it connect with people.
And I find it interesting because before this battle, there was a big narrative that, Kendrick was great at making moments like his control verse, but he wasn't a battle rapper. He didn't know how to actually concoct a good diss song. That's why people stupidly gave Drake somewhat, if not of an upper hand, then at least they had some sort of confidence in him before this battle kicked off, because we've never actually heard Kendrick in like a mainstream sort of rap battle, but we've heard Drake in a few. But Kendrick, emphasized here, and he reminded us on Whacked Out Murals that he was rap battling in Nickerson Gardens. Like, you could YouTube Kendrick Lamar rap battling from way back in probably, 2005, 2004. He's been doing this. But what he hasn't done is give us an album like GNX. And this is the point in the interview where he starts talking about it. Ebro notes that there's been this kind of pattern with Kendrick where he releases, one album that's for the culture and then one that's for the critics. You had Good Kid, Mad City, which was cinematic, full of all these bangers. Then you had To Pimp a Butterfly, which was, full of jazz and alternative production, very heavy, socially conscious themes and subject matter. That was more for the critics. Then you had Damn, which was definitely more for, the culture, for the stadiums, for the parties, the clubs, the playlists. Then you had Mr. Morale, which was his most intimate album. And now you have GNX, which was definitely an album that almost everyone could appreciate. Like, when it first came out, everyone said it was a mixtape or thought it was a mixtape because it was so raw. It was so digestible off the rip. The energy was right there in your face. It didn't seem overly complex. It's a much easier listen than a Mr. Morale, and Kendrick explains that he grew up with his family members always playing hip-hop, right? He names DJ Quick and Dr. Dre, so all this stuff, it's in his DNA. And you heard that right off rip when he came out with Good Kid, Mad City, but that project was more about telling his own story rather than maybe presenting the world with his own version of, let's say, like a 2001 by Dr. Dre, where you're getting banger after banger.
Go back even further, man. Speaking on that energy, like, it's my cousins was like DJ Quick, and Dre, these folks that my people was playing. So I always had that DNA. And, you heard that DNA a little bit on Good Kid, Mad City, but I wanted to tell my story first, right?
But with GNX, he felt like the time was right, given the atmosphere within hip-hop. There was this very low energy in 2023, and so he took it up a notch in 2024, and GNX was kind of like that icing on the cake or that victory lap to give us, in my opinion, his version of a 2001.
Fast forward to GNX, I felt it was just a perfect time because not only the energy was lost, but it was an energy that was bubbling inside of me as well. I wanted to go back to the forefront of just the bite and just the grit of rap, just all raps and hard-ass beats. And that's like the basics for me. I thought about, what I used to like when I was a kid. Hard raps, good beats, that's smacking, right? And it was a great transition from Mr. Morale.
Kendrick also explains his approach to creating Mr. Morale. While Ebro chalked it up to kind of being an album for the critics, Kendrick explains it more as a glimpse into his subconscious. It's a harder album to unpack, but he was curious who could relate or gravitate to such an intimate album.
It was a great transition from Mr. Morale because that was my most intimate. I wanted to go inside of my own psyche and my own personal withdrawals and see how it connects with the public and who can relate. During this time around, I think it was necessary coming out of that cocoon and feeling like, okay, I arrived now. I can spread my wings and show every state of who I am as far as Kendrick Lamar.
But this time around with GNX, he felt like it was the time to show the world every side of him. And I guess that's why the world was so surprised by that unprecedented energy that we got from Kendrick in 2024.
I was just thinking about the culture, really. It's always that for me first. I'm not even bullshitting with you.
Then Kendrick speaks on what it meant to win 5 Grammys off a battle rap song.
When people talk about rap, the conversations I hear, they think it's just rap and it's not an actual art form. So when you put records like that at the forefront, it reminds people that this is more than just something that came 50 years ago. They forget that it's even been here 50 years and like kind of like belittle it. So I love to see that it gets that type of recognition for just straight raps, from awards to the billboards, all that, because this is just as big as an art form and a genre as any other genre.
And he emphasizes a very important point in that oftentimes we overlook the actual art of hip hop. It's so much more than obviously just rhyming a bunch of words. So to see these massive institutions like Billboard or the Grammys or just the fans start placing value back on the art form, back on the bars, it's beautiful to see because, again, for the last few years, hip hop has been about the melodies, the vibes, the drip, the clout. The beauty of lyricism got lost, and we saw a resurgence of that with this battle, with everyone, digging in for little Easter eggs and, double entendres and what, each line meant. And then what came after it was all the award shows catching up and putting hip hop back on the forefront. Like, you probably didn't know that because Not Like Us got all those Grammys, artists like Taylor Swift and Billie Eilish both received no Grammys because a hip-hop song, a diss song nonetheless, sweeped all the categories they were nominated in. And beyond Not Like Us just being, a bona fide hit, Kendrick goes on to emphasize that the beauty of it being a hit is that there's actually carefully crafted, well thought out writing within it. It's not just, a bouncy, catchy song about a PDF. There's real messaging behind it, and that's what makes its success that much more substantial for the current state of hip-hop.
Knowing that trial and knowing what I put in as far as my thinking process and what it takes to get there, I do not look at it as a small endeavor because it's a hit record. No, it's actually some writing in that shit. Whether it connect with you on a spiritual level, whether it connect with you on a comedic level, whether it connect with you just on a personal dynamic, it's still from a writer's point of view.
And then we get to the best question of the interview, in my opinion, which comes from Nadeska again, asking about the writing process behind these Kendrick songs that carry deep themes. She mentioned specifically Reincarnated off of GNX, which, the song has 3 verses, each of them rap from the perspective of different famous musicians and the trials and tribulations that they faced. And then the third verse, Kendrick is reincarnated as Kendrick Lamar, and he has this conversation with God to where he basically realizes he's faced with the challenge of fighting the devil to pursue this higher purpose or God's purpose of pushing positivity through the music. It's this, beautifully layered, complex song. So for her to ask about it and for us to get a glimpse of, what it takes to write a record like this, that makes me more happy than if I heard him explain how he wrote Meet the Grams. Because it's not just Reincarnated. Kendrick has a lot of these really layered thematic songs where he might be rapping from a different perspective, like a Lust or a How Much a Dollar Cost or, the Art of Peer Pressure, where it's almost like a movie. And he says he literally approaches songs like this as if he's writing a story.
With records like that, it's always going into my mind of what if and crafting out my what if ideas to the masses. So when I think about concepts and I think about what I actually believe and what I feel, I just go through a breakdown as if I'm reading a book and how I want people to hear this from a book sequence. My initial process is, okay, how can I open them up to the story and how can I drive them to the ending point to make them feel what I'm trying to convey, whether they take their own perspective from it or they take mine.
Then Kendrick talks about watching SZA's come up because they obviously came up both from the TDE camp, and he says he sees a lot of parallels between her rise and his. But it opened up a new perspective for him because now he could understand how people around him felt when he was on his come up, because he got to see that third-hand perspective of her come up, and the way they approach their craft has always been very similar.
For me personally, watching her career and where she's come from, it's amazing to see. I get to finally see how certain individuals see me come up in the process, because I seen her day one coming in the studio and writing songs, throwing away songs, writing another song, throwing away songs, and songs is hard. And I understood that process though, wanting to be great. Even when we, people saying this is classic records, you're like, no, I'm gonna write another one. And I understood that and I seen it. So to see it now magnified, it's like she always had it.
Then Kendrick speaks on his company, PG Lang.
30 incredible individuals, 5 extraordinary executives that work day in, day out to make sure we are doing something that will long live the culture, you know, from a music standpoint, from a creative standpoint, fashion, film, books, day in, day out of just being around like-minded individuals that have different perspectives outside of just music.
And for those of you who didn't know, PG Lang is a lot more than just a record label. It's a production company. They do film, they do fashion, they do books. I believe they frame it as this big creative hub. Like all the visuals you've seen, the Super Bowl promos, the GNX trailer, all the music videos, Squabble Up, Not Like Us, the pop-out concert, all the visuals you saw there, what we're gonna see at the Super Bowl, it's all crafted by both Kendrick Lamar and Dave Free. All the imagery, all these Easter eggs, it's not some production company doing it. It's PG Lang, it's Kendrick Lamar, and it's Dave Free themselves crafting it in-house. So, you know, if you ever find yourself trying to dissect the different imagery in a Kendrick music video or in his performances, just know that all that stuff, all that imagery came from Kendrick directly himself.
That's all PG Lang. That is us sitting day in, day out, from the edits, the production, the stage design, the music, the sound tech. It's everything across the board, and it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of creative individuals. I can't sit here and say it's all me, because these are people that are just as passionate and want to see us win, but also want to put out something that lives a long, long time.
Kendrick also speaks on Dave Free, you know, the same dude who Drake accused of having a kid with Kendrick's fiance.
With Dave's creative mind, it's just, he's insane, man. That dude is like Basquiat in so many different fashions. You know, you can clearly pick his brain about anything, and he'll give you an answer right down the middle to help you decide for yourself. So that's something I can always appreciate.
And then we get to the Super Bowl, where Kendrick kind of gives us a glimpse at what we could expect. Allegedly, according to Akademiks' burner account, his Kendrick propaganda machine, or his Drake propaganda machine, Akademiks TV, they had leaked a recording of the set list of all the songs that Kendrick's going to do, and Interscope copyrighted it. So, you know, they're running with that as the narrative being, you know, oh, Interscope copyrighted it, so this is the real set list, and, you know, they're trying to take it down so no one could hear it. Well, I listened to it because I hate spoilers. I'm not a surprise guy, but I'm not going to spoil it for you guys, and obviously, you know, they put a lot of work into this, so for us to be spreading it in this half-baked way without knowing all the full details, without all the visuals, without everything that goes into it, that wouldn't be fair for you guys or for them. But I will say this, based off, you know, the songs in that leaked file, let's just say this, it's not gonna be no bubblegum pop set. Like, if this set list is real, I think Kendrick is coming with some energy that we really did not expect for the Super Bowl halftime show. Now, he compares the process of designing the show to the Mr. Morale tour, because obviously with the Super Bowl, he only gets 15 minutes, so you really have to look at your catalog from a bird's eye view to decide, you know, what songs to pick, which ones are important to perform, plus understanding that it's a way different demographic than your regular fans who typically come to your concerts. But even with Kendrick saying this, and after hearing this leaked set list, like, it's very surprising to me, the song choices, but I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to spoil nothing for you guys. Let's just hear what Kendrick had to say about designing the set list.
Mr. Morale is like an hour and 30-minute tour, so it's like smacked down all the way to 13 minutes. It's interesting because it lets you know in your perspective on how you think about catalog and the music. For me, I love being present. I love being present, man. It's very hard for me to live in the past. It's very hard. I respect the past wholeheartedly, but being in the now and being just locked into how I feel and the energy I have now, this is me, this is Kendrick Lamar, 37 years old, and I still feel like I'm elevating. I'm still on the journey, though.
And this part really stuck with me. I think this is a great way, a great mentality to approach life when you're dealing with pressure, high performance, etc. Like, imperfect action is always better than sitting around overthinking, and that is the embodiment of living in the present. You're not too worried about, you know, mistakes you've made in the past. You're not too worried of what could happen in the future. You really just go full force, do what you got to do, and, you know, grow from the action that you take in the present. Kendrick also speaks on the ties that his family, his heritage have to New Orleans and the South, and what that line on TV Off really meant about walking into New Orleans with the etiquette of LA.
Us growing up, all our grandparents either from Louisiana, Texas, Chicago. So our dialect, it gauges from like the South and like the Bay Area. So like going to the store, we say finna. I'm finna go to the store. It's not no LA, right? That energy right there and you making that correlation, it means a lot to me for people to understand that. I'm at a point in my life, I can't necessarily fake the funk for nothing. I have to be who I am authentically.
And like Kendrick says, this whole evolution of his artistry has just been this massive continuum. The passion has always been there. He's always been on the same path since the beginning. But Nadeska asks him, as he's gotten bigger, does he feel like his role as an artist has changed?
I don't think I knew exactly what my role was. Early on, I had maybe clues of it, but now today I can truly say it's to express myself and express things that people can necessarily say on the daily and for them to actually relate to. Come from the most vulnerable place where people can actually feel it. For me, that's the role for me as an artist. I'm present that particular time in the studio, in the booth. If I feel frustrated, you're going to feel it.
And this is where I believe we get to the most powerful part of the entire interview. I think Snoop Dogg has touched on this in the past as well, where really an artist's job sometimes is to be a voice for the voiceless. People who come from harsher environments, who are often misunderstood, misrepresented, don't have the same access to resources to, properly educate themselves, move up the ranks within society, or people who come from a background where, you got to keep composure at all times for your own safety. People who have been raised through generations of oppression and violence. When you can hear music and feel the stories being told within it as if it pertains to your own life or from artists who have lived similar lives to yours, it almost acts as a roadmap or a guide to help uplift you, to get you out of the situation you're in, or at least make you feel like, you're not alone. And I think that's the most powerful thing an artist can do, is ultimately make you feel like you're kind of speaking through them, through their message.
I've grew up with cats, still to this day can't have a conversation. The most meanest, aggressive individuals, but they can't even look you in the eye and express themselves the way they want to. So they resort to other things. I know that I have the tools necessary to communicate myself. I got to do it for them. I got to make records like Reincarnated. They feel that way, but they cannot project it. When they hear somebody actually giving them affirmations, it allows them to speak more freely and be open because, again, I come from the same place they come from.
Now, to wrap the interview up, Kendrick gives us a little bit more of a glimpse of what we could expect to see Sunday at the Super Bowl.
Storytelling. I've always been very open about storytelling through all my catalog and my history of music. And I've always had a passion about bringing that on whatever stage I'm on, whether it's a war tour or whether it's 500 people at Key Club. I've always had a form of that.
And finally, he has a couple kids in the crowd ask him questions, and I think this one's really great. Kendrick's asked, what can kids do to stay authentic? What advice would Kendrick give to help kids tap into their own authenticity? And to that, Kendrick says,
they said the number one thing people feel in the room, over love and over fear is being authentic. How many times I've been in a room where people felt you so intensely that it inspired them and it inspired the person next to them and inspired the people in their household. You have to believe in yourself and have to know that it's only one you. You're an amazing individual, unique. You're a miracle. I wake up every day and I'm like, this is crazy.
And that's essentially it. There's not enough information within this interview for Drake to sue over, but I think there is a lot of important life lessons in here, and it's great to kind of peel the curtains back. And more importantly than hearing Kendrick, dive into all the drama that ensued with Drake, I think it's even greater to hear his perspective on where hip-hop's at, how the beef impacted hip-hop in a positive way, a little glimpse into his creative process, and how he continues to grow and evolve. It's all about staying on your path, being in the moment, being present, and being authentic. So while Drake's performing out in Australia, dropping petitions and acting eccentric, Kendrick is about to perform at the Super Bowl, being present and remaining authentic. Let me know what you guys think, and I will catch you in the next one.